All right, guys, we are live on this special Wednesday MMA talk. Usually it's Tuesday MMA talk, but unfortunately I was busy yesterday, and we have a lot to talk about today. We have interviews with two guests today. Dan Henderson is on the show, and AKA coach Javier Mendez. But we're going to start off talking about this interview with Nate Diaz. If you weren't watching it, which I have no idea why you're watching me if you haven't watched this Nate Diaz interview, holy crap. The reason they call the MMA hour is it can only go an hour or longer, never shorter. Nate Diaz and Ariel Helwani talked for over an hour, I'd have to say. It actually ended at 2:09 Pacific time, which of course it did. That's hilarious. And yeah, Nate Diaz said a ton about everything that's been going on in his life for the past couple of months since his win over Conor McGregor. And wow, one of the best interviews I have ever seen. Nate Diaz was just incredible. So many quotable lines. Some of the things he said. One thing about Mayweather and McGregor, I'll whip both of their asses in one night. Boom. That is going to be the article that you see everywhere after this. Ariel Helwani did one of the funniest things I've ever seen. He showed Nate Diaz the clip of Dana White saying that Nate Diaz wasn't a needle mover. And of course, Nate Diaz reacted to it, and it was just a hilarious moment because now it kind of shows. Nate Diaz is saying, hey, pay me. I'm a needle mover. He also talked about the meeting that Nate Diaz had with Dana White and Lorenzo Fertitta and all of that stuff. I'll break it down for you guys in a bit if you haven't watched the interview, but I suggest you definitely should watch the interview. Wow, it was one of the most amazing interviews I've ever seen. So much good about it. A couple of other quotable lines. When Conor McGregor tweeted after his loss to Nate Diaz, Nate Diaz's response, That's a nice tweet, motherfucking dork. Like, just stuff like that. An absolutely hilarious interview. I want to get your guys' comments on that, so gonna go to the live chat right now. Right now, I'm just trying to see whether or not the live stream is actually working. So far, I'm not seeing a whole lot on it, probably because everyone is still recovering from that amazing interview with Nate Diaz. Wow, that whole thing just blew me away. But as far as interviews go, we have Dan Henderson on the show. He talks his fight coming up at UFC 199 against Hector Lombard. He talks about that there. And we have AKA head coach Javier Mendez on the show to talk Luke Rockhold against Michael Bisping, what Luke Rockhold's going to do. He has to change his style of camp now that he's fighting Michael Bisping instead of Chris Weidman. He also has two fighters in Daniel Cormier and Cain Velasquez fighting at UFC 200. So really, really busy time right now at AKA. So speaking of the Nate Diaz interview, for those who didn't watch it, right away they started off talking about Nate Diaz's award. Ariel Helwani, he's a very smart journalist. He always starts off soft. Throw the soft questions out there and then try to go for the hardball ones. So he talked about Nate Diaz's award. Nate Diaz recently was given an award by the state of California for his perseverance and his hard work, athleticism in his fight against Conor McGregor. So he was awarded there. So Ariel Helwani started off that way a little bit soft and then moved on to his meeting with Dana and Lorenzo. And basically what Nate Diaz told us about that interview is not a lot happened. Nate Diaz said, I want this amount of money. Dana and Lorenzo said, well, we're not going to give you this money. Okay, great meeting. But he said that TMZ was wrong when they said Dana White stormed out of the meeting. Of course, TMZ was wrong in that. And he said it was over-exaggerated, that they shook hands, went to the mural afterwards, took photos, that everything was all well and good between them. It's just they couldn't reach a final, verdict. I don't think that's the correct word, but they couldn't reach proper negotiation. So he said that about the interview. He also said that he was initially upset when Conor McGregor got the rematch because he's never gotten a rematch in his life. Every single time he loses, most of the time it's a close decision. He says, hey, you didn't actually beat me. I want a rematch. But UFC doesn't give out rematches for fights that aren't title fights. And of course, McGregor gets a rematch right away. Nate Diaz also talked about how he feels that the UFC is trying to get that win back for McGregor by booking this fight quickly, for doing it at UFC 200 again when Nate Diaz has never gotten a rematch. And he thinks that the UFC is buying McGregor some more time using Floyd Mayweather as a publicity stunt. Keep McGregor in the headlines and the news that way. Let McGregor train a bunch. Pull him out of UFC 200. That way he'll be better against Nate Diaz this time around at whatever time they fight, UFC 202, 203, whenever that is. He also dissed Dennis Siver, which was hilarious, saying that Dennis Siver isn't ranked and that's who Conor McGregor beat to get the title shot. And although that is true, he ended up fighting Chad Mendes instead and got a deserved title shot. But before that, it was questionable whether or not he deserved that initial title shot. Okay, so I'm assuming most of you watched the Nate Diaz interview, so we're going to go right in to the Dan Henderson interview. Me and him talk Hector Lombard about him retiring, and also he says something about Anderson Silva, that he thinks that Anderson Silva has lost some of his, I guess, credentials, that he's not necessarily should be looked at as one of the greatest of all time. He says that in the interview, and that interview starts right now. All right, joining me today is legendary MMA fighter Dan Henderson. Dan, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, no worries. How's it going?
It's going well. How's your training camp going so far? You have fight against Hector Lombard at UFC 199.
Training camp's going great. I just two training camps back to back, I guess, without fighting. So I'm ready to finally get in there and beat somebody up.
Nice. Well, Hector Lombard, he's an interesting fighter, and I would assume that the game plan for this fight would be to survive the initial onslaught that he's going to bring, survive into the later rounds, and then beat him up. But you're not a guy who does that. Like in the Fedor fight, if he comes out swinging, you're going to come out swinging. So what do you think the game plan's going to be? Are you going to survive the initial onslaught, or are you just going to go out there and try to match power with power?
Either way, I'm going to survive his onslaught. I think, he comes in and he throws looping punches, and just got to make sure I'm, a little more crisp and throwing down the pipe and go after him. I'm not afraid to get in there and swing with him.
Mm-hmm. And you still have a long contract left, lots of fights left. Are there any retribution fights or any fun fights that you still see for yourself out there after this fight?
I don't know. Actually, I don't know what will happen after this one. This is the last one on my contract right now. But
okay.
Yeah, I'm it's basically up to me whether I want to keep fighting and renegotiate, or this may be the last one. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. I'm going to just wait and see how it goes and how negotiations go afterwards.
Mm-hmm. And do you think the result of the fight would affect that? Because I actually didn't know that this was your last fight on the UFC contract. Do you think you'd want to stay in the UFC, go? When do you think that decision process will happen?
I don't know. Probably when I start negotiating. I definitely want to stay with UFC, but and the outcome of this fight won't really affect my decision at all.
Mm-hmm. And would you be willing to, if you can't negotiate with the UFC, go somewhere like Bellator or World Series of Fighting? Or if you can't get the UFC done, then do you think that would be the end of it for you?
I don't know. I think either way, I need to have an income for a couple years. So, you know, I'm still planning on either fighting or having a job representing UFC or the sport of MMA. So, yeah, I'm just going to kind of see what my options are and you know, decide what I want to do.
Mm-hmm. And one of my favorite sayings in MMA is by Mauro Ranallo. He always says that you couldn't erect a Mount Rushmore of MMA without your face on it. Now, if you were to have a Mount Rushmore of MMA, of course, have your face on it, who would be the 3 people beside you?
Oh, I don't know. You know, it's a tough one. There's a lot of legends in the sport that have done a lot of things for the sport. You know, Randy Couture,
of course,
definitely probably one of them. Yeah, I don't know. I would have maybe said Anderson Silva, but kind of taints his legacy that he tested positive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Fedor might be one of them. So I don't know. There's a lot of tough guys out there.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that is something that has changed Anderson Silva's legacy, the fact that he popped, and that we're seeing a lot of guys now in the USADA era popping for steroids? Do you think that's something that does change their legacy, or is what they accomplished in the past, and then testing positive right now doesn't really affect that?
Well, I think it definitely affects it. I don't think it you know, puts it back down to 0, but it definitely diminishes it and puts a question in everyone's head, you know, how long have they been doing that? And, you know, it's sad to see, especially somebody that has done a lot like Anderson Silva. You know, you never know, you know, how clean he was along the way.
And speaking of that, you're fighting a guy in Hector Lombard who his last fight, he was coming off a suspension for testing positive for a banned substance. So what do you think of your opponent Hector Lombard for testing positive beforehand? Does that change your opinion of him?
Well, I think, you know, everyone kind of assumed that he was probably doing something by the way he looks. You know, but you can't always judge a book by its cover, but he definitely tested positive. I'm hoping that he doesn't test positive this time because, you know, I want to fight.
Mm-hmm. And you're one of the, like I said in the introduction, veterans of the sport. You'll go down as a legend. If there's any young fighters that are listening right now, what do you think would be your biggest piece of advice for young fighters wanting to get into the game or that are already training?
I don't know. I guess just have fun and learn along the way. But it's definitely something you got to be committed to, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And my final question, your old pal, Michael Bisping, he's fighting for the title now. How do you think he's going to fare against Luke Rockhold?
Yeah, I think style-wise, it's a great fight for Luke, and it'll probably happen like the last time they fought. You know, Luke's got a little range on him, and pretty good with his hands, and Bisping won't be able to take him down. And Luke's nasty on top, so you know, I think.
Well, thank you for joining me. Oh, sorry, you're cracking up there. Anyways, that's all I have for today. Thank you for joining me, and good luck in your fight at UFC 199 against Hector Lombard.
No worries. You're welcome. Have a good day.
Awesome. Thank you. That was Dan Henderson.
No worries.
That was Dan Henderson, the legend. All right, so that was my interview with Dan Henderson. Great guy to talk to. Yeah, he had a lot to say about a couple of different things. The whole entire Anderson Silva thing was probably the most interesting thing that he had to say. The fact that Anderson Silva would have been on his Mount Rushmore of MMA, him included. I think he said it would be, him, Fedor, Randy Couture, and it would have been Anderson Silva had Anderson Silva not popped for performance-enhancing drugs, which is interesting because I'm of the opinion that Anderson Silva popped for those drugs because of the whole leg break thing, but again, he was caught, so you kind of have to assume that if a fighter gets caught for PEDs and banned substances once in his career or her career, then they are probably not against breaking the rules, meaning that they probably have done some illegal drugs or banned substances throughout their careers. Or throughout their career. So, here's one thing that I want to talk about. And it's a rant that I've been waiting to do for a bit, and it's about PEDs. Because PEDs are a problem in the sport. We know that, and we've heard fighters say it before, that a lot of fighters are on some type of performance-enhancing substance. And now we have USADA, and USADA comes in and, the sport's going to get cleaned up, right? Well, what have we actually seen USADA do in the last couple of months? They've been around since, last July? I believe it was UFC 196 when USADA... No, it wouldn't have been 196. It would have been the Chad Mendes 189. Chad Mendes, Conor McGregor. That was the first event where USADA started testing. So it's been almost a year. And what has really changed? Who has gotten caught big time when it comes to performance enhancers? And my biggest problem with this is that the guys that are getting caught, they're not getting caught with super enhancement. They are getting caught with very, very minor things. And sometimes they're not even getting caught at all. For example, BJ Penn this past week, right away the USADA warning came out, everybody look, BJ Penn's been taking steroids. Well, once we actually got the information, it turns out that he used an IV. Okay, those are sometimes used to mask banned substances. Oh wait, he told USADA that he was using an IV? Well, wait. If he is doing something illegal or wrong, usually people don't admit to it. Usually they don't come right out and say, oh yeah, I'm doing that. Oh, shit, it's illegal? My bad. BJ Penn, I don't think he knew that what he was doing was wrong in taking IVs. Because he said before, I don't need IVs, but he was talking about weight cutting. So why would he admit to USADA straight up, yeah, I've been using IVs, why? Oh, they're banned all throughout the year. Well, I didn't know that. Boom. Off of UFC 199, suspended. USADA, they're doing such a great job of making these cheats not fight, right? No, that didn't do a thing. BJ Penn admitted to it, and I'm wondering if he didn't admit to it, whether or not he would have gotten caught. And the same thing with Machida. Oh yeah, let's stop Machida, a guy who's using performance enhancers. Let's stop him from fighting. Well, guess what? He admitted to using a supplement that you can get from GNC. Said, yeah, I'm using this supplement. Why? Oh, it's on the banned substance list? Oh, I didn't know that. I mean, it doesn't do too much to enhance performance, like the same as creatine or protein powders. Oh, I'm suspended? So how is USADA actually cleaning up the sport when what they should be finding are the guys that are juicing to the gills? You're telling me that Vitor Belfort hasn't been suspended in the past for steroid use when it comes to like 5-6 years ago, TRT Belfort, that he wasn't suspended during that time. And now guys are getting suspended like Lyoto Machida, BJ Penn, and even Yoel Romero, who, even though he does fail the eye test, it ended up that he took a supplement that had contained banned substances that he wasn't aware of, and that the people that made the supplement weren't even aware of. So what I'm trying to say with this rant is USADA actually cleaning up the sport? I'm sure it's scaring the hell out of a lot of people. And I'm sure that it will catch people taking illegal substances. But what I believe is that these people that take super performance enhancers, stuff that just like getting you juice to the gills, like whatever Vitor was on, They're not catching those guys. They haven't caught anybody that looks juiced to the gills and have caught them with something that would do that. They've just been catching these minor infractions where it's, oh yeah, that was legal a couple of years ago and now it's not. Oh, this is a supplement that you can get at any GNC or any other place that sells supplements. That is not the war that USADA or the UFC should be fighting. They should be fighting the war of enhanced drugs, enhanced steroids, stuff that can't be detected. And it's like the war on drugs. The criminals will always be so many steps ahead, but they can always catch the little guys. They can always catch the drug dealers. But is that going to stop the war on drugs? No. They can keep catching these guys who are popping for supplements that you can buy at GNC that aren't reading the rules correctly and used an IV or used a supplement that's now been banned but really doesn't do too much to enhance performance. Meanwhile, there are guys that are juicing, that are using steroids that can't be detected. And those are the guys that need to get caught. But they won't be. And just like the war on drugs, the drug dealers are just going to keep on selling drugs and moving drugs, and they're not going to get caught. But as long as the police are arresting all of the little people who are buying drugs and selling drugs on the streets, oh, then it's fine, right? No, that's not the war. The war needs to be on the bigger picture. You're catching these smaller guys, and that's not going to do a thing. Steroids will continue to be rampant in the sport until you catch those big guys, until you get a whole group of people that are taking a banned substance that just makes you a superhero. And until then, catching these guys on supplements that you can get at any store, at any Walmart, that's not winning the war. And catching guys for using IVs and stuff, yeah, they might be masking supplements, or masking performance enhancers, but you gotta catch those performance enhancers, because this doesn't do a lot. So that's my complaint about USADA. So far, I'm not impressed with it. I haven't seen a lot. I haven't seen the sport change in a huge way. Who are the people that are getting caught with using steroids or extreme performance enhancers? So far, there's been little things. Crow Cop, he wasn't even drug tested and caught for using steroids. He told them, he was just like, yeah, I need to use this because, my shoulder's fucked up. Oh, I can't use it? Well, I'm going to retire. So it's right now the war on drugs in the UFC. I don't think USADA's winning it. And hey, maybe in a year they'll catch a whole bunch of people. But all of the major people that have been caught for performance enhancers, that was before USADA even did anything. And these people that are getting caught now, they're not getting caught from drug tests. They're straight up admitting it, saying, hey, USADA, I'm doing this. Oh, that's illegal? Well, I'm screwed. So I don't think so far that they're catching people who are cheating, who are bad people, who are using substances that will allow you to kick the head off a guy. I don't think that's what's happening right now. I think what's happening is they're catching the little things where people are making errors, not the people who have all these doctors injecting stuff into them and making them a superhero. So that's my rant on PEDs. Moving away from that topic, we now have an interview with Javier Mendez, coach at AKA, and he has a very, very busy schedule. Luke Rockhold at UFC 199, Cain Velasquez and Daniel Cormier at UFC 200. So here we go, my interview with Javier Mendez. Check it out. All right, our next guest on Tuesday MMA Talk is the head coach at AKA, Javier Mendez. Javier, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on board, Michael.
No problem. So, it was announced yesterday that Michael Bisping is now the new opponent for Luke Rockhold at UFC 199. Now, obviously, Michael Bisping is a much different opponent than Chris Weidman. Could you tell us how big of a change that's going to be for Luke Rockhold in this training camp?
Not much of a change, and actually, everybody knows Michael Bisping is a really good striker. He's a dangerous guy. He's in great shape.
there's really not much of a change other than the fact that the thought of a takedown is not as dangerous as with Weidman, and the fact that Michael's going to want to stand more than go to the ground because it's a huge advantage for Luke on the ground. So I don't think Michael's going to want to go there. He's going to want to stand. So from that perspective, we're kind of training in some regards for what's coming because we're training a lot of stand-up because Chris was going to come with stand-up too. So it's kind of didn't really change much at all.
And is it a lot easier to train for guys when you've already trained for them before? Because Luke Rockhold fought Michael Bisping. It wasn't that long ago, maybe 2 years ago at this point. So is this going to be a lot easier for Luke Rockhold to change his attention to a guy like Bisping?
Well, yeah, the biggest part fighting a guy like Michael would be rising to the occasion, and being prepared because he's a different fighter. Come June 4th, it's not going to be the same Michael that was the last time. And everybody knows that with, those little gloves, that one shot can change the whole outcome of what goes on. So as long as Luke stays really sharp, everything should go our way. But, we have to make sure everything's right. And he's a very dangerous guy, and, he has nothing to lose.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes him even more dangerous because he's willing to do more.
And this must be a really interesting and busy time at AKA. You have three guys right now, your three top guys, at the same time. You got Luke Rockhold fighting at 199, Cain Velasquez, and Daniel Cormier at UFC 200. How busy is the gym right now?
It's fairly busy, It just depends on the day, whether it be wrestling day or jiu-jitsu day, but it's fairly busy. It's fairly busy, but on the other hand, it's not as busy because a lot of the other younger guys already had fights, so they're just basically barely coming back to the gym, Habib and all the other Russian fighters that I have, they're back home, and they won't be back till probably August, September, So there's about 6 or 7 of them over there that would be training right now. So, it's busy, but it's not super busy.
Yeah, and both Cain Velasquez and Daniel Cormier are coming off of injuries. How are they progressing right now in fight camp?
Really good, really good. I mean, Cain is doing exceptionally well. Daniel, he is able to grapple some, so that was something new because, with that injury he had on the, on his leg, he wasn't able to wrestle, but he was able to wrestle some, just this Tuesday a little bit. So that was a big plus. So everything's on track. Daniel is on the road to 100% recovery. And, just hopefully nothing else happens. And, we should have a very healthy Daniel Cormier, come fight time.
Nice. And going back to the Luke Rockhold Michael Bisping match, I know that Daniel Cormier, when I talked to him in February, he said that a big thing about the first match against Jones was the psychological part of it. Jones just chirping him and trying to get into his head. That's what Luke Rockhold's going to have to deal with, fighting a guy like Michael Bisping. Has Luke Rockhold talked to you about that? Is he worried about that? Or does he not really care about that type of stuff?
We didn't really have a conversation about that, but if you're reading the interview that they did the other day on Fox Sports with Daniel and Kenny were interviewing both of them, and they were going back and forth. You could tell that those guys, it didn't take long for them to get heated up. So it's going to be a roller coaster. Michael Bisping's going to make it very interesting. And he's the type of guy that you want to watch fight, win or lose. You want to watch him fight because he's entertainment. He's what the sport's all about. Entertainment, and he motivates Luke because Luke wants to shut him up, and then Michael, he wants that battle. So we'll see what happens. But he's an entertainment fighter for sure, and you definitely want to see him.
Mm-hmm. It should be a really entertaining lead up to that fight. I'm going to let you go now. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk, and good luck to all of your fighters at UFC 199 and UFC 200.
All right. Thank you, Michael. All right,
awesome.
Bye-bye.
All right, so that was my interview with Javier Mendez. He had a lot of good stuff to say. I was actually really interested in the fact that the the fight with Chris Weidman, now that it's changed to the fight with Michael Bisping, that Luke Rockhold doesn't really have to change much. And so I thought about that afterwards, and I was like, are Chris Weidman and Michael Bisping similar fighters? Obviously, Chris Weidman has much, much better wrestling, but I think that Michael Bisping's stand-up is a lot better than Weidman's, just because Weidman always has the threat of a takedown, so that's what makes his stand-up okay. Meanwhile, Michael Bisping, he punches in bunches. He's really good at just putting a pace on a guy. So I'm not going to say Javier Mendez was wrong. Obviously, he knows a lot more than I do, and he's studied both guys in the past, but I think they are a little bit different fighters. But even Luke Rockhold tweeted out that it's pretty much going to be the same thing. It's just he's fighting Weidman, but without the wrestling. And that Bisping doesn't even have to worry about the wrestling, because Rockhold said that he's just going to keep it standing the whole time, trying to knock out Bisping. So that's going to be really interesting. Also, updates on Cain Velasquez and Daniel Cormier, that both of them are okay. And so far, training camp is going good. Heading into UFC 200, Cain Velasquez fighting Travis Brown, and Daniel Cormier in the main event against John Jones. Those are going to be two great events, but we have a great event coming up this weekend. And this is going to be my pitch to the UFC to make me one of their advertising guys. UFC Fight Night, Almeida vs. Garbrandt, Sunday, which is a friggin' weird time to have a fight night card on a Sunday, and it's in Las Vegas. It's not in Australia or anything, so I don't know why they're having it on Sunday. But we have Thomas Almeida against Cody Garbrandt. That's going to be a hell of a fight. I can't wait to see that. That bantamweight division right now looks so good. And at UFC 199, Dominic Cruz against Uriah Faber, that's going to be good stuff. TJ Dillashaw, I think, is fighting at UFC 200 against Asuncao. So a lot of good fights in the bantamweight division. That one headlining the card, and I'm happy to see the UFC doing that, giving the bantamweights the headlining slot. And then we have Renan Barão and Jeremy Stephens as the co-main event. I'm going to be happy to see Renan Barão fighting somebody new other than TJ Dillashaw and Uriah Faber, because those are the two guys that he's fought for the past two and a half years. So it'll be nice to see him fighting against somebody new that can actually stand up to him. It's going to be a good fight. I mean, TJ Dillashaw did, but everybody before then just got destroyed by Renan Barão. So it'll be a really interesting fight. And Tarek Saffiedine against Rick Story at welterweight. That's going to be a good fight too. I talked to Rick Story last week on the show, and he sounds pretty confident. He hasn't fought in 2 years though, but he says ring rust is not going to be an issue at all. That's going to be a great fight. And then on the prelims, we have two really good fights on the prelims that I'm excited for. One being Eric Koch. I haven't heard that name in forever. He hasn't fought in 2 years, and a lot has happened in 2 years. He's fighting Shane Campbell. I'm really excited to see him come back. He's one of those guys that is from the WEC days, young up-and-comer that once he got into the UFC had some success, then fell off a little, and now he's just been out for so long. But can't wait to see him back. And then the big one that everybody's excited for on the prelims, live and free on UFC Fight Pass, even though you have to pay for UFC Fight Pass, Aljamain Sterling against Brian Caraway. Sterling finally off of the contract negotiations and finally getting to fight against Brian Caraway, who is a tough bantamweight. A lot of people are underestimating him. That's kind of the narrative going into this fight, that Brian Caraway is underestimated and that Aljamain Sterling could be the next breakout star. So it'll be interesting to see how that fight goes. I don't think Sterling is going to dominate like a lot of people think. I think Brian Caraway is going to do his part to keep the fight very, very close, and I wouldn't be surprised if Caraway ends up with the decision win. You see it a lot of times when the UFC signs a solid contract with a guy. They always have great performances when their contract is up, but the second they sign a lengthy and really well-paid contract, that's when they have bad performances. So if I had to make a prediction for this fight, I'm saying Sterling's probably going to win, but I wouldn't be surprised if Brian Caraway squeaks out the win. So that is UFC Fight Night, Almeida versus Garbrandt. That is this Sunday, the main card starting at 9 p.m. I'll be doing stuff over at Bloody Elbow, probably results, and I'll be tweeting from my Twitter account. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, by the way, this is me wrapping up the show, because if you've been watching the Nate Diaz interview and this, you've been on the computer for a couple of hours, so go outside and play. But first, follow me on Twitter at the Mikey Hutch. There will be links on YouTube on Bloody Elbow, or just Google Michael Hutchinson MMA Twitter, and it will come up. I had a notification from the Bloody Elbow team, and I was like, oh, hopefully my audio isn't off again. But no, we went through the show without any audio glitches, which is great. No technical glitches. I think everything went according to plan. Obviously, things could have probably been structured better, but we were coming off the Nate Diaz interview, and I was like, whoa, people are going to want to talk about it. So, yeah, pretty good show, though. This is our third episode. Dan Henderson, Javier Mendez. I'm working on an interview for next week. I'm not going to say with who. They are fighting at UFC 199. This close to getting the interview. I was supposed to interview this person a while ago. Very close. It is not Luke Rockhold, though. That interview is not happening. I was very close to that interview, too. But yeah, hopefully have this secret person that's fighting at UFC 199 on the show next week. And hopefully others. I usually do all that booking and stuff in the following days. So the second I know, you'll know. So that's it for this week. That's it for this special edition. I don't know why it's special, but it is special because it's on a different day, the Wednesday MMA talk, but we will be back next Tuesday to talk to you guys again. So thank you for watching, and have a great week.